Can capitalism last forever? Karl Marx thought the answer was no. Back in the 1860s, he came up with an idea he called the law of the tendency for the rate of profit to fall. In plain English, he argued that in the long run, capitalism will destroy itself. Over time, the system makes it harder and harder for capitalists to make a decent profit on their investments, which will eventually lead them to crisis and collapse. For a long time, a lot of people dismiss Marx. Capitalism kept growing, kept creating wealth, and kept surviving crisis after crisis. But in 2014, a French economist named Thomas Piketty published a massive book called Capital in the 21st Century. And something weird happened. Piketty's data ended up pointing in a direction that looked a lot like what Marx had predicted over a century earlier. Economist Minqi Li takes this story further. In his paper, he builds a simple model, looks at real data from the United States and China, and argues that we might be living through the exact moment Marx was talking about. Before we get into the big theory, we need to understand one basic idea: the profit rate. The profit rate is just the amount of profit a capitalist makes compared to how much money they had to invest in the first place. If you put $100 into a business and make $15 in profit in a year, your profit rate is 15%. In greater scales, this number matters more than you'd think. Capitalism only works if the profit rate stays high enough. If profits are strong, businesses invest, employment goes up, and the economy grows. If profits shrink, businesses stop investing, workers get laid off, and the whole system stumbles. Historically, the United States needs a business profit rate above 15% just to keep things stable. Any number below that would give you either the Great Depression or the Great Recession. So the real question is, what determines whether the profit rate goes up or down over time? Marx noticed something about how capitalism develops. To compete with each other, businesses constantly invest in better technology, to buy bigger machines, build bigger factories, and automate as much as they can. Marx called this raising the organic composition of capital, which is just another way of saying that over time, businesses spend more on machines and less on workers. Here's the thing. In Marx's framework, profit ultimately comes from the work that human beings do. Workers produce more value than they get paid, and that difference is what capitalists pockets as profit. So if you keep replacing workers with machines, you're shrinking the very source of your profit. To put it simply, it's only human labor, not machines, that generate profit in the long run. Marx didn't say the profit rate would fall in a straight line. He said there would be counteracting forces that could slow the fall or even reverse it for a while. Things like paying workers less, finding cheaper raw materials, or opening up new markets could temporarily boost profits. But he believed the underlying tendency was always pushing downward. For a long time, this idea was controversial. Critics pointed out that capitalism had survived for decades without collapsing, but Li argues that we need to look at the long arc of history, not just a few decades. Fast forward to 2014, Thomas Piketty releases his book and it becomes a worldwide sensation. He spends hundreds of pages looking at tax records going back centuries, and he finds a pattern. In most of history, the rate of return on capital, what he calls R, has been higher than the economic growth rate, what he calls G. When R is greater than G, wealth concentrates at the top because people who already own capital get richer faster than the economy grows. Piketty calls this his second fundamental law of capitalism. He warns that in the 21st century, as economic growth slows down, the ratio of capital to income will keep rising and inequality will get worse. What Piketty didn't really emphasize is that his framework is deeply connected to Marx. Li points out that Piketty's capital income ratio is basically the same thing Marxist economists call the capital output ratio, which is just a modern version of Marx's organic composition of capital. So Piketty, whether he meant to or not, ended up rediscovering Marx's problem from a different angle. Here's where Lee's paper get really useful. He builds a model that's simple yet powerful enough to explain a lot of economic history. The model has two moving parts. First is the profit growth rate, which is how fast profits are growing each year, and second, the ratio of accumulation, the share of profits that capitalists reinvest into new businesses, factories, and technology rather than spending on yachts or stock buybacks. The key insight is that in the long run, the profit rate settles at a level that equals the profit growth rate divided by the ratio of accumulation. Let's make that simple. Say profits are growing at 5% per year, and capitalists reinvest 50% of their profits. The long-run profit rate will settle around 10%. This formula tells us two important things. First, if economic growth slows down, the profit rate will fall unless something else changes. Second, if capitalists start reinvesting a bigger share of their profits, the profit rate will also fall because more investment means more capital chasing the same amount of profit. The only ways to stop the profit rate from falling are to speed up economic growth or to convince capitalists to stop reinvesting and start spending their money on consumption instead. Both of these options run into serious problems, as we'll see. Li tests his model against real data from the two biggest economies on Earth, the United States and China. In the United States, the story is one of a long, slow stagnation. From 1940 to 1970, the US profit rate bounced between 15 and 20%. Since the 1980s, it's hovered around 15%, with a sharp dip during the 2008 financial crisis. The long-term average from 1931 to 2014 was about 15.5%, which lines up almost perfectly with what the model predicts. China's story is more dramatic. From 1990 to 2010, China's profit rate was sky high, around 25%. That's what fueled its economic miracle. But since 2010, China's profit rate has been crashing. By 2014, it had fallen to 16.2%. And Li warns that if the trend continues, it could hit 10% within a few years, a level the US only saw during the worst years of the Great Depression. Why is everything crashing? Because China's ratio of accumulation has exploded. Since 2011, Chinese capitalists have been reinvesting over 60% of their profits. That's an incredible rate of accumulation, and it built modern China. But combined with slowing profit growth, the math just doesn't work anymore. The problem with capitalism is this. The system is built on what sociologist Immanuel Wallerstein called endless accumulation. Capitalists have to keep reinvesting their profits or else they get crushed by competitors. There's no option to just coast. You grow or you die because that's how competition works. China has been the perfect example of this classical capitalism. It poured an insane share of its profits into new factories, roads, and cities, and it industrialized faster than almost any country in history. But the same relentless investment is now driving its profit rate into the ground. The United States took a different path. Starting in the 1980s, American capitalists largely stopped reinvesting in real production. Instead, they lent their money to workers, to the government, and to each other. This strategy, called financialization, lets American businesses keep their profits rates high while doing very little actual productive investment. But this workaround has its own limits. You can only pile up household and government debt for so long before something breaks. And if you're not investing in new factories and technology, your economy eventually stops growing. The US long-term capital stock growth rate has fallen to around 1.5%, which is a perfect recipe for slow motion decline. Here's where the argument gets really urgent. Even if capitalism could somehow solve its internal profit problems, it now faces an external problem that no amount of financial engineering can fix: the planet. The global ecological crisis is no longer a future threat, it's happening right now. To avoid catastrophic climate change, biodiversity collapse, and resource depletion, wealthy countries like the United States will probably need to shrink their economies, not grow them. This idea is called degrowth, but degrowth is completely incompatible with how capitalism works. Always remember, if economic growth falls to zero or goes negative, the profit rate has to fall too, unless capitalists stop investing almost entirely. And if capitalists stop investing, the whole justification for their wealth, that they're the ones driving innovation and growth, all of those will disappear. They become, in Li's own words, a purely parasitic class. So capitalism is stuck. It needs growth to survive. But growth is now driving ecological collapse. If it tries to keep growing, it destroys the planet. If it stops growing, it undermines its own legitimacy and stability. Li's conclusion is quite blunt. Either capitalism keeps running and triggers global ecological catastrophe, or people organize to build a different system that can actually live within the planet's limits. Either way, he argues Marx's 150-year-old prediction will be vindicated. The tendency for the rate of profit to fall isn't just a dusty piece of 19th century theory. It's playing out right now profoundly in the crashing profit rates of both the US and China, the endless financialization of the global economy, and the ecological crisis that no amount of GDP growth can solve. The question isn't whether capitalism will face a limit. It's whether we'll manage that transition in a way that protects working people and the planet, or whether it will happen through catastrophe and collapse. At this point, you probably already suspect that the economy isn't working the way it's supposed to. And this is a universal experience. Our wages are stagnant, our homes are unaffordable, our climate is falling apart, all the while the rich at the top get to be rich, richer, and richest. Minqi Li's paper gives you the framework to understand why none of this is an accident. It's not just bad policy, it's not just a few greedy CEOs. It's the system itself working exactly the way it was designed to work, running into limits that it cannot overcome. The good news is that once you understand how the system works, you can start imagining how a different one might work. And that's where the real change begins. If you want to see more videos like this, please like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below. This is Polity. Let's get to work.